September 7th, 1940, just after 4 p.m., southern England. The late summer air over the channel is deceptively calm. A pale haze hangs low on the horizon, blurring the line between sea and sky. On the ground, Londoners are still finishing their workday. Trams rattle, factory whistles fade. Somewhere a kettle is lifted from a stove. Then, without warning, the sky changes. Far beyond human sight, beyond the curvature of the earth itself, something invisible reaches out and touches metal. Inside the cockpit of a Heinkel He-Water 11, a Luftwaffe bomber pilot checks his instruments. Altitude steady, formation tight. Hundreds of aircraft stretch across the sky behind him, wave after wave, engines droning with mechanical confidence. The plan is simple: fly low, fly fast, surprise the British defenses, break London, break morale, force surrender. They believe they are unseen. They are wrong. On a lonely stretch of the English coastline, tall steel towers rise from the ground like skeletal giants. They do not fire, they do not move. They simply stand, humming faintly, alive with unseen energy. Thick cables snake into concrete bunkers where men sit in dim rooms, eyes fixed on glowing green screens. A thin line flickers, then another. Within seconds, the room comes alive. Raid detected. Multiple contacts, bearing east-southeast. The words are calm, practiced, almost bored. But what those words represent is extraordinary. For the first time in history, an entire nation knows it is about to be attacked before the first bomb is ever dropped. You can almost feel the shift. The quiet confidence draining from the attackers, replaced by something colder: calculation. Readiness. This is not luck. This is not coincidence. This is the moment an impossible idea proves itself under fire. Hours earlier, miles inland, a thin, balding man in his late 40s stands alone in a small office, listening to reports crackle through a telephone line. His name will not appear in headlines. There will be no statues of him during the war, no cheering crowds. His name is Robert Watson Watt, a civilian, an engineer, a man who once tried to detect thunderstorms. Now his machines are tracking death. Watson Watt does not look like the architect of Britain's survival. He wears rumpled suits. He speaks quickly, nervously. His eyes carry the permanent fatigue of a man who has spent years arguing with bureaucrats who did not understand what he was trying to build. Years earlier, when Britain's air defenses consisted largely of binoculars, sound mirrors, and guesswork, Watson Watt made a claim that sounded absurd. He said you could see aircraft with radio waves, not after they arrived, not when bombs were already falling, before. He said Britain could turn its entire coastline into a warning system, an invisible wall, a shield made not of steel or guns, but information. Most people laughed. Radio was for communication, for music, for voices crackling through static. Using it to locate enemy bombers hundreds of miles away sounded like science fiction. Some called it impractical, others called it a waste of time. The Luftwaffe certainly did. German intelligence reports dismissed British detection methods as crude and unreliable. Their pilots were trained to believe that surprise was guaranteed. Britain was too small, too slow, too unprepared. And now, on this September afternoon, hundreds of German aircraft are flying straight into a trap built by a man they have never heard of. Back in the radar station, operators lean closer to their screens. The contacts multiply. The green glow fills with moving echoes, precise, measured, unmistakable. This is not guesswork. Each blip represents a formation. Each movement tells a story: altitude changes, course corrections, speed. The system does not just see planes, it understands them. Phones ring, orders move up the chain. At Fighter Command Headquarters, Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding studies the incoming data, calm, controlled. He does not scramble everything, he does not panic, he waits. This is the brilliance of Watson Watt's system. It does not just warn, it buys time. Time to choose, time to conserve strength, time to strike only when it matters. Spitfires and Hurricanes sit on airfields, engines silent, pilots waiting. They are not burning fuel chasing ghosts. They are not blindly patrolling empty skies. They will take off only when the enemy is exactly where the radar says he is. Outside, the first sirens begin to wail across southern England, a sound that will soon become terrifyingly familiar. But today the warning comes earlier than ever before. People have time, factories shut down in an orderly fashion, children are moved to shelters, anti-aircraft crews prepare their guns with grim efficiency. Fighter squadrons receive precise vectors, headings calculated from invisible waves bouncing off German bombers miles away. The Luftwaffe notices something is wrong. As they cross the English coast, they are met not by confusion or surprise, but by resistance. Fighters rise to meet them, not scattered, not desperate, but concentrated, focused, deadly. The Germans had expected to find Britain blind. Instead, Britain is watching. In the air, the battle erupts. Tracers streak, engines scream, bombers break formation under attack. Some turn back, others press on, shaken, confused by how quickly the British interceptors arrived. On the ground, Watt listens. He knows this is only the beginning. Radar alone will not win the war. It cannot shoot down a single aircraft. It cannot stop a bomb once it falls. But it has done something no weapon ever had before. It has changed the rules. For centuries, war had belonged to those who struck first, fastest, hardest. Now, knowledge itself has become a weapon, an invisible one, and the enemy has no idea how deeply exposed they are. As night falls and fires begin to burn in London, a terrifying truth settles in. The Luftwaffe has begun the Blitz, and Britain has begun to fight back. Not with more planes, not with more guns, but with a system that sees the future just far enough ahead to survive it. But this shield has weaknesses, and the enemy will learn. The first bombs fall just after dusk. They do not fall where the Luftwaffe expected. Fires bloom across the outskirts of London, but the concentrated blow, the knockout punch Hermann Göring promised, never quite lands. German bomber crews report heavier fighter resistance than planned. Interceptions are coming too early, too accurately. At Luftwaffe headquarters, confusion spreads. This was not supposed to happen. The German air doctrine is built on speed, mass, and surprise. Radar to them is a secondary tool, short-range, unreliable, easily confused. British defenses, they believe, should still be reacting blindly, scrambling fighters after bombers are already overhead. But reports from returning crews tell a different story. RAF fighters are waiting, positioned, climbing directly into the bomber streams. Something is guiding them. Along Britain's coastline, the chain-home radar network hums through the night. It is not one tower or two or a single miraculous device. It is a system, dozens of stations stretching from Scotland to the Isle of Wight. Tall steel masts, some over 350 feet high, pumping out radio waves that sweep the sky in great invisible arcs. Each pulse races outward at the speed of light. Each pulse returns with secrets. In bunker-like control rooms, young men and women, many barely out of school, sit in rotating shifts, eyes strained against cathode ray tubes. They track echoes that flicker and fade, learning to distinguish weather from aircraft, noise from threat. This is not glamorous work. The rooms smell of sweat and warm electronics. The hours are long. The pressure is relentless. One mistake could mean hundreds of deaths. And yet they grow frighteningly good at it. You can almost feel the rhythm developing. Radar picks up the raid. Plotters mark positions on large maps with colored blocks. Controllers relay information to sector stations. Fighter squadrons are scrambled with exact headings and altitudes. No guesswork, no wasted motion. This is something entirely new in warfare, centralized command and control driven by real-time information. At the center of it all stands Air Chief Marshal Dowding's Fighter Command, and beneath it, Watt's quiet revolution. Robert Watt spends these days moving between offices, stations, and laboratories, constantly troubleshooting. He knows chain-home is not perfect, the towers are fixed, the equipment is vulnerable, the system works best at high altitude and struggles with low-flying aircraft. The Germans could exploit that if they realize what they are facing. Watt fears one thing above all else: discovery. If the Luftwaffe understands how deeply radar shapes Britain's defenses, they will target the towers relentlessly. They will blind the network. And without it, Britain's fighter force, already outnumbered, will be stretched to the breaking point. Yet something strange happens. The radar stations remain standing. German bombers fly past them, sometimes directly over them. Occasionally, a station is damaged, but never systematically destroyed. It is a critical mistake. German intelligence officers report the tall towers but underestimate their importance. Some believe they are mere radio transmitters. Others think they are too crude to matter. Goering himself dismisses them as minor obstacles. After all, Britain still burns. Bombs still fall. The Blitz is underway. Surely radar cannot be decisive, but down in the plotting rooms, the British know better. Every day the system stays alive is another day Britain survives. As September turns into October, the air battles intensify. The Luftwaffe changes tactics, shifting from airfields to cities. London becomes the primary target. The night sky glows red as docks, warehouses, and neighborhoods burn. Civilian casualties rise, morale is tested, but something vital remains intact. Fighter command does not collapse. Despite being outnumbered, despite exhausted pilots, despite aircraft losses that should have been catastrophic. Radar keeps buying time. It allows squadrons to rotate, pilots to rest, planes to be repaired instead of wasted on futile patrols. The RAF fights smart, not blindly. German pilots begin to feel it. They talk about it in mess halls and debriefings, how the British always seem ready, how fighters appear as if summoned, how the sky over England feels hostile long before the bombs fall. They are fighting a country that knows they are coming, and knowledge, it turns out, is terrifying. Inside Britain's air ministry, the implications are becoming clear. Radar is not just a defensive tool, it is a force multiplier. Britain does not need to match Germany plane for plane. It only needs to be in the right place at the right time. And Watt's network makes that possible. For the first time since the war began, invasion plans begin to stall. Operation Sea Lion, the planned German invasion of Britain, depends on air superiority. Without control of the skies, troop transports would be slaughtered in the Channel. Radar is quietly preventing that control from ever being achieved. But the Germans are not fools. They are learning. New tactics are being discussed. Low-level approaches, night raids, electronic countermeasures. Somewhere in Berlin, questions are being asked. What if Britain isn't guessing? What if Britain can see? And if they can, how long before they find a way to stop it? October 1940, the Luftwaffe changes its approach. Daylight raids, once the backbone of German confidence, begin to taper off. Losses are too high, fighter escorts are stretched thin. British interceptors keep appearing at the worst possible moments, climbing into bomber formations with unnerving precision, so the Germans turn to the night. Darkness, they believe, will restore surprise. From Berlin's perspective, the logic is sound. Radar, as they understand it, should be crude and limited. Night bombing will reduce fighter interceptions. British defenses will be forced to rely on sound, searchlights, and luck, methods as old as war itself. On paper, it looks like adaptation. In reality, it is an admission. They have failed to break Britain by day. Night falls over England like a curtain of ink. Blackout regulations plunge entire cities into near-total darkness. Streetlights vanish, windows are covered. Even cigarettes are cupped in hands to hide their glow. Above, the sky fills with the low, constant drone of engines. The Blitz becomes a ritual. Sirens, shelters, explosions, fires. For civilians, the terror is immediate and personal. For Fighter Command, the challenge is technical and existential. Radar was designed to see aircraft at altitude approaching in organized formations. Night raids scatter that order. Bombers fly lower, they spread out, they slip through gaps. And yet the system adapts. Chain home stations still detect incoming raids, even at night. The information is rougher now, less precise, but it is still early warning. Still time to activate anti-aircraft batteries, time to vector night fighters, time to save lives. In darkened control rooms, operators strain harder than ever. Echoes smear across screens, returns overlap. Weather interferes, every contact requires judgment, human judgment. This is where Watt's vision reveals its true depth. Radar was never meant to replace people, it was meant to empower them. And the people rise to the challenge. The Luftwaffe notices something else. Even at night, British defenses are improving. Searchlights converge faster, flak bursts cluster closer. Night fighters, once nearly useless, begin scoring kills. The margin of safety the Germans expected is shrinking. Whispers spread through German units. The British are adapting too quickly. Some officers begin to suspect radar plays a role. A few suggest targeted attacks on the coastal towers. But by now, priorities have shifted. Cities are burning. Retaliation has become the goal. Precision gives way to punishment. It is another mistake. Radar stations continue to operate. Some are damaged, cables are cut, antennas are struck by bombs or machine gun fire, but crews repair them, often within hours. Temporary masts are erected, power is rerouted, improvisation becomes routine. The system bends, it does not break. Watson Watt watches this with quiet intensity. He knows Britain is still hanging by a thread. Fighter losses remain severe, pilots are exhausted. Aircraft production barely keeps pace with attrition. Radar has bought Britain time, but time alone is not victory. By November, something extraordinary becomes clear. The Luftwaffe has failed to destroy the RAF, not crippled it, not neutralized it, not forced it into collapse. Britain still controls its airspace, just enough. Operation Sea Lion is postponed, then postponed again, then quietly shelved. An invasion without air superiority would be suicide. The impossible has happened. A nation that should have fallen stands defiant. And at the heart of that defiance is a civilian engineer's belief that information could be weaponized. But success brings danger of its own. As Britain survives, Watson Watt's creation becomes more valuable and more vulnerable. New technologies are emerging, new threats are forming, and across the channel, German scientists are asking the same questions Watson Watt once did. If radio waves can see aircraft, can they be fooled? Winter 1940. The battle moves into a new dimension, one without fire or explosions. In laboratories and intelligence offices across Germany, physicists and engineers begin dissecting reports from the front. British interception patterns, radar-like warnings, fighter responses that arrive too fast to be coincidence. The conclusion is uncomfortable. Britain is not guessing. Britain is listening. For the Luftwaffe, this realization is dangerous. Air power depends not only on aircraft and pilots, but on information. Who sees first, who reacts faster, who understands the sky better than the enemy. If Britain owns that advantage, Germany must take it away. And so begins a quieter war, a war of signals. German scientists experiment with countermeasures. They explore jamming frequencies. They test ways to confuse or overload detection systems. Some ideas are crude. Others are frighteningly sophisticated. Thin strips of metal, later known as duple or chaff, are considered. Radio noise generators are tested. Specialized aircraft are proposed, designed not to bomb cities but to blind defenses. But progress is slow. Germany entered the war believing radar was secondary. Britain entered believing it was essential. That difference now shows. Watson Watt, meanwhile, is already thinking several steps ahead. He understands that radar supremacy will not last forever. Any system can be studied. Any signal can be mimicked or disrupted. The question is not whether the enemy will adapt, but how quickly Britain can stay ahead. New radar sets are developed, mobile units, improved resolution, shorter wavelengths. Britain's scientific community, once fragmented, is now unified by urgency. Universities, private firms, and military labs collaborate in ways peacetime Britain never allowed. War has forced innovation into overdrive, and radar is evolving from a defensive warning tool into something far more powerful. By 1941, British radar begins guiding aircraft to targets, not just away from them. Night fighters use airborne radar sets to hunt bombers in darkness. Anti-aircraft guns receive improved targeting data. Coastal radar tracks ships, Getiaki, submarines, and surface threats. The invisible shield becomes a web. Watson Watt watches his creation grow beyond anything he originally imagined. He had wanted to prevent surprise. Now Britain is shaping the battlefield itself, and still his name remains unknown to the public. The pilots get the glory, the fighters become legends, the Blitz becomes a story of civilian endurance. Radar hums quietly in the background, uncelebrated, indispensable. Across the Channel, Germany finally begins deploying countermeasures in earnest. Some work, briefly. Jamming reduces clarity. False echoes appear. Confusion spikes in British control rooms. For moments, the system stumbles, but the operators adapt. They learn the patterns of interference. They develop new filters. They switch frequencies. They adjust tactics. Radar becomes less a machine and more a conversation, an exchange of moves and counter-moves between unseen adversaries. And Britain keeps its edge just long enough. By the time German countermeasures mature, the strategic picture has shifted. The United States is entering the war. British production has surged. Air defenses are layered and resilient. The window to blind Britain has closed. For Watt, the realization is bittersweet. His invention helped save Britain from invasion. It reshaped modern warfare. It proved that knowledge could outweigh numbers, but it also ensured that war would never be the same. From now on, battles would be fought not just with steel and fire, but with electrons, signals, and invisible waves racing through the air. The age of information warfare had begun, and Britain had survived its first test. But the legacy of that survival would stretch far beyond 1940, far beyond Britain, into every modern battlefield to come. By 1942, the war has grown vast. Britain is no longer standing alone. American factories roar to life. Convoys cross the Atlantic under constant threat. Radar, once a desperate national experiment, is now an allied standard. And yet Robert Watt is quietly being pushed aside. The system he created has outgrown him. Bureaucracies expand, committees multiply. New managers take control of projects he once ran personally. Younger engineers, armed with fresh ideas and sharper mathematics, refine radar into something sleeker, smaller, deadlier. Watt watches from the margins. He is not bitter, but he is tired. He had been a catalyst, not a conqueror. A man who opened a door and then stepped back as others charged through it. His greatest triumph had already passed, even if few recognized it. In wartime Britain, heroes were pilots and soldiers, men with visible courage. Radar operators remained anonymous, engineers invisible. The shield that saved the nation left no medals behind. Yet the impact of Watt's impossible idea is everywhere. Allied bombers now navigate at night using radio guidance. Naval radar hunts U-boats across blackened seas. Airborne warning systems coordinate massive formations that would have been chaos just years earlier. The principles first proven along Britain's coastline now shape the entire war, and crucially, they shape its outcome. Germany never regains the initiative in the air. The Luftwaffe is forced into reactive defensive roles. Allied bombing campaigns grow more precise. Invasions become possible. First North Africa, then Italy, then Normandy. All of it depends on seeing first, on knowing. Watt leaves government service before the war ends. His later years are quieter, marked by consulting work and writing. He never fully receives the recognition his contribution deserves. But history eventually catches up. When the story of Britain's survival is told honestly, radar stands at its center, not as a miracle weapon, but as a system, a fusion of science, organization, and human judgment. A reminder that wars are not won by courage alone, they are won by preparation. Look back to that September afternoon in 1940, the calm air, the approaching bombers, the thin green lines flickering into existence on a screen. In that moment, a nation gained the power to see the future just far enough ahead to survive it. A civilian's idea, once dismissed as impractical, became an invisible wall against invasion. And the Luftwaffe, flying confidently toward Britain, never understood what blinded them. They were not defeated by a trick. They were defeated by a truth. Knowledge changes everything.